Hello humans. I am Professor Fox. I have an attractive British accent because I was educated at Oxford University in England. I hope you like my accent. I have been asked by the human instructor in this course to give you my foxy understanding of critical thinking, so pay attention humans. Don't be distracted by social media. I am going to show you some charts in this video. You can stop the charts at any time to study them or to take notes. In this video you can also turn on the captions in the caption icon at the bottom to get captions, if you wish. So, let me ask the question, why do we need critical thinking? In 2007, Steve Ballmer, who was the CEO of Microsoft, said that the Apple iPhone would never have a significant share of the market. Who wouldn't believe the president of a hugely successful company? But his opinion was wrong. The Apple iPhone now generates more revenue than Microsoft. Have you ever heard of a computer company called Digital Equipment Corporation? In 1977, the president of the Digital Equipment Corporation said that there is quote no reason why anyone would want a computer in their home. End quote. Who wouldn't believe the president of a hugely successful company? IBM had the same belief around that time. The opinion of the president of Digital Equipment Corporation was wrong. The company had financial problems and was acquired by another computer company in 1998, and that computer company had financial problems and was acquired by HP in 2002. HP makes computers for the home. US financial advisor Bernie Madoff promised investors average returns of 16 to 20% on investment. It was too good to be true. People wanted to believe it was true. It was a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme, where older investors are paid from the revenue from newer investors. As long as the number of newer investors grows, investors are paid and the pyramid scheme works. Madoff defrauded 4,800 clients of $64.5 billion. Madoff pleaded guilty in 2009 and was sentenced to 150 years in federal prison. That's a lot of time to spend in prison. These are all failures in critical thinking, humans. So, let me ask, what is critical thinking? The simplest definition is that critical thinking is thinking about thinking. A better definition would be that critical thinking is the application of rationality to think about thinking. A more thorough definition would be that critical thinking is a mental discipline to use reason to think independently of interior and exterior influences and not be persuaded by emotion, bias, habit and social pressure. Another way of saying that is that critical thinking protects us against the irrationality in ourselves and others. Human beings are often influenced by emotions, such as fear, anger, wishful thinking or greed. These emotions overpower reason. People are more afraid of dying due to a plane crash or terrorism, than by a car accident or a heart attack. The statistics are that you are afraid of the wrong thing. People will vote for a politician who appeals to fear, anger, hope or greed. Some politicians make people afraid of a worsening economy, loss of jobs, crime, immigrants or foreigners. Those fears become a strong motivation to vote. People will make investments in frauds that appeal to hope or greed. Greed and wishful thinking become a strong motivation to make bad investments. Let me ask, why is critical thinking useful? One reason is that critical thinking is easy to understand because it does not require knowledge of a topic in order to evaluate the information on the topic. In that way it is democratic. Another reason is that critical thinking, you just know what kind of basic questions to ask. One approach to critical thinking is to learn typical errors or fallacies in critical thinking so that you can recognize them. There are so many fallacies in critical thinking that we will not spend time listing them in this course. I have a 190-page book in my foxhole that lists 79 fallacies in critical thinking. I am not going to give you 79 fallacies to learn. I doubt that you could remember 79 types of errors in critical thinking. But let me show you a chart to list a few. Remember that you can stop the chart to study it or to take notes. So, now you have 6 good examples of fallacies in critical thinking. Being able to identify a fallacy quickly allows you humans to avoid their influence on your mind. When you identify a fallacy, you immediately disqualify it from having an influence. Remember to be suspicious if you hear these fallacies. And remember not to use them yourselves. I have to tell you that my experience of you human beings is that you have poor memories, unlike foxes, but, if I say that, it would be anecdotal evidence, or a fallacy. I am always glad when a human being forgets, because that is what I think is normal for human beings. That is confirmation bias. I think you get my point. I am not going to ask you to memorize fallacies of critical thinking. There are too many. We could spend this entire course just studying fallacies. Instead, I am going to give you a simple, 4-point test for whether information meets the basic criteria for critical thinking. I am summarizing critical thinking into 4 factors that are easy to remember. If you look at critical thinking in philosophy, it is so complicated that you need a PhD degree to understand it and difficult to apply in the real world. That would be impractical. So, we need something simple and practical to apply that we can use every day. I call this applied critical thinking. So, defining the terms is a crucial first step. For example, what does the term successful mean? If we say, Donald Trump is successful, what is our definition of success? If we say that Donald Trump is a successful politician or a successful businessman, what is our definition of success? People may be arguing about Trump being successful, using different definitions of success or irrelevant terms or irrelevant comparisons. Part of the argument is because they have not defined and agreed on terms yet. The next criteria is assumptions and premises. Human beings can make errors in thinking based in their hidden assumptions and premises. These are all conclusions, based on hidden premises that were common beliefs. Because they were common beliefs, people believed they did not need to be stated or justified. Assumptions. 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 We live in a world surrounded by our assumptions and the assumptions of others. Often these assumptions are implied or hidden. The result is that hidden assumptions can create confusion and misunderstanding in communication. For example, assumptions can be bad in a relationship. You take a person for granted, you assume something, and they are angry with you for that assumption. In history, there are famous false assumptions. It was once assumed that it was impossible to fly without wings, and since it was assumed impossible, there was no reason to try. Einstein assumed that it would be impossible to have nuclear energy. And so on. Assumptions can prevent us from doing what we should do, and assumptions can be a reason for doing what we should not do. In thinking, assumptions can make critical thinking faulty, so it is a good idea to make hidden assumptions visible. Individual disciplines have what the textbook calls warrants or general principles of logic that those in the discipline understand and accept and do not feel need discussion. But those outside the discipline need to have the warrant explained to them. For example, an economist might say that with a declining birth rate, the government needs to increase taxes. For someone outside economics, the logic might not be obvious because the warrant is missing. The warrant is that the tax rate partly depends on the number of people being taxed. A declining number of taxpayers needs to pay for a larger number of senior citizens who need hospital care and other services. The next criteria is facts. As the human instructor has told you, in critical thinking you identify what is a fact and what is an opinion, so that they do not get confused. Very often human beings believe that an opinion is a fact, when it is not a fact. And sometimes human beings think that an interpretation of numbers and statistics is a fact, when it is an interpretation or an opinion and not a fact. For example, cause and effect can be an interpretation. For example, I know that silly hedgehogs hear a rooster crow in the morning when the sun comes up. The silly hedgehogs interpret that as cause and effect. They think that when the rooster crows, then the sun comes up. Thus, if the rooster gets sick and does not crow, then the sun will not come up. Silly hedgehogs would worry about that because they misinterpret the cause and effect. So, use critical thinking and do not be a silly hedgehog. Here is an example of the use of implication in a tweet by Donald Trump. Trump was upset because he was being sued over Trump University because students believed it was not a credible university. Trump wanted people to think that the trial was a sham and a fraud, so he used ad hominem attacks on the judge. The ad hominem attacks were based on implications and the implications were based on racism. Look at this tweet from Donald Trump. Donald Trump says, quote, "There's a hostility toward me by the judge, tremendous hostility, beyond belief. I believe he happens to be Spanish, which is fine, he's Hispanic, and we haven't asked for a recusal, which we may do, because we have a judge who's very hostile." Unquote. A federal judge, Gonzalo Curiel, was the judge for a trial of fraud against Trump University. The judge was born and raised in Indiana from parents who immigrated from Mexico. The unstated implication is that a judge with Mexican heritage is biased against Trump. So, Professor Fox has given you 4 simple criteria to use for critical thinking. First, make sure that the terms are defined clearly and accurately. Second, identify any hidden assumptions and premises. Third, identify the facts as separate from interpretations of the facts. And fourth, identify hidden implications. If you can do that, you will be as smart as Professor Fox and you will not be a silly hedgehog. Another simple way to identify errors in critical thinking are the examples in the next chart. I want to warn you about one more thing that interferes with critical thinking. That is your social inhibitions. Social inhibitions come from the natural inclination of human beings to promote harmony in the group and avoid conflict. That desire to promote harmony and avoid conflict sometimes prevents human beings from asking questions and from using critical thinking. If you are in a discussion and you are worried that the facts will upset someone or that there will be a conflict with someone because of the facts, then your emotions may be affecting how you use reason. In some cases you want to promote harmony and avoid conflict. But in a situation where critical thinking is more important and facts are more important, then should use critical thinking and you should use facts. But that is not always easy for you emotional human beings. I will let you humans decide what is best for you. I am a fox, so I cannot speak for human beings. Here are some simple questions you can use in critical thinking. Well, humans, that is the end of the podcast of Professor Fox about critical thinking. Remember the 4 criteria: terms, assumptions, facts, implications. That should not be hard even for humans to remember. I hope you feel foxier after listening to Professor Fox. Now it is time for Professor Fox to retire to his foxhole with a good book. I am reading a book about the irrationality of human beings so that I can understand you better. I wonder why humans have such difficulty thinking rationally. We foxes do not have the same problem. I do not even watch Fox News because it is unreliable. Anyway, enough said.